Good afternoon and good morning again. My name is Liam Fee with UN-Habitat, and I'm sitting here in Bangkok with ESCAP colleagues here in the room. Thank you all very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join this webinar. This is the first of two webinars that UN ESCAP and UN-Habitat are collaborating on as part of the preparation for the Future of Asia and Pacific Cities Report 2019. Before we get to the presentations in a moment, let me just introduce briefly the Future of Asia Pacific Cities Report. The report will be the latest iteration of the State of Asian Cities Report, which has been published in 2011 and 2015. However, to make the report more relevant, it was decided this year to focus on the future development of Asia Pacific cities and to provide a more practical knowledge on implementation of issues rather than to merely focus on the current state of Asian cities. The Future of Asia Pacific Cities report will be divided into 4 chapters, which are Chapter 1, the future of urban governance and capacities for resilience. Chapter 2, the future of urban finance. Chapter 3, the future of smart urban data and technologies. And Chapter 4, the future of urban and territorial planning. This webinar and the webinar that will follow it, which the second webinar will be on private sector investment for resilience, which will take place on November the 8th, are being held in support of Chapter 1, the future of urban governance and capacities for resilience. So why do this webinar and why did we choose this topic? Well, we had a very lengthy internal discussion about what the focus of these webinars would be. And the particular debate that we had was around, should we focus on key message type issues, sort of good governance, inclusion, inequality issues, or should we focus on more frontier type issues that present both a huge range of challenges and a huge range of opportunities for cities in the region to meet the 2030 agenda and the new urban agenda in cities. And in the end, we focused on the latter. And this webinar is an attempt to broaden the discussion that we're having, partly to ensure that we're capturing the best fit, most innovative practice, but also to broaden our horizons on governance issues relating to the use of technologies for resilience. So this webinar in particular seeks to explore the application and distribution of technology for urban resilience. It will examine questions of how new and emerging technologies can be utilized to enhance resilience, whether by governments, private sector, society, or in everyday use by people themselves, and how evenly and effectively such technologies can be distributed to benefit the poorest and most vulnerable. What we don't want this discussion to be is a discussion of just the latest cool app that you might have heard about and downloaded. But rather we want to really focus on the issues around the application and the distribution of technology and innovation. So for this webinar, we've assembled 3 highly distinguished speakers, and let me very briefly introduce them. The first speaker will be Ms. Norliza Hashim, the Chief Executive of Urbanice Malaysia, under the Ministry of Urban Wellbeing, Housing and Local Government from the Government of Malaysia, who is joining us from Kuala Lumpur. Ms. Seonyoung Kim, who's the Senior Manager of the International Climate and Environment Center in Gwangju City, South Korea, who is collaborating with the European Commission on its International Urban Cooperation Program and is currently joining us from Brussels. And finally, Josh Woodard, who is the Regional ICT and Digital Finance Advisor from FHI 360, which used to be known as Family Health International, which is an American INGO, focuses on health and well-being, but it also focuses on technology and its application across health, economic development, climate, and disasters. So before I hand over to the first speaker, let me briefly explain the format of the webinar. Each speaker will have about 10 minutes to highlight and introduce how they're approaching this application and distribution of technology questions. And then after that, we will have a brief structured discussion from the floor. And then after that, I will open up to the audience, both all the audience online and the audience here in the room in ESCAP in Bangkok to ask questions to each and to all of the panelists. I will probably gather up rounds of questions and then ask them to in a cluster of questions rather than taking questions one by one. And just a brief on the sort of protocols of how to use this this webinar technology. We just practiced a minute ago. There's a hand raising button. If you have a question, please raise your hand and we will see it here, and then we will ask you to ask your question. Secondly, if you feel shy to speak, or if the connection is not so good, you can write a question in the chat function to the group, and we will also be able to read that out to the speakers. So if you wish to ask, sorry about that. If you have a question to any of the speakers, then please either raise your hand or use the chat function. And so that's it. Without further ado, I'd like to hand over to the first speaker. Madam Norliza from Urbanice, Malaysia, the floor is yours.
I think the topic that has been given for us in this webinar is to discuss on these innovative technologies to build resilient and inclusive cities. And the perspective of Malaysia here is how important that is. I think in light of Malaysia becoming more and more urbanized, we are almost 75% urbanized today, the use of innovative technologies has become more and more important. We are facing a lot of challenges in our urban areas today, especially with regards to climate change. We have a lot of natural disasters happening with more rainfall than it used to be. Also, with more people living in urban areas, we have more issues with regards to congestion, safety. So of late, there's a lot of ideas on how we use technologies to actually provide information to communities, as well as use sensors as intelligent control system, and also to explore any form of geospatial technologies in terms of providing more accurate and detailed data, locational data, to apply some of the specific and better solutions. So we've been doing a lot of late, actually, especially in areas of floods, where we've already started to develop a flood alert system, where we're monitoring the rise in water levels in our rivers and providing alert systems to communities living surrounding these areas. But I think one area that we still need to work on a lot here in Malaysia is how we communicate a lot of this information with our communities. This is where probably, having more, our government currently is emphasizing that we widen our technology in terms of communication to 4G all over the country, so that we are all, better connected, even to the rural areas. So I think if we are better connected, then therefore a lot of this information could get across to people all over the country. So definitely, I think in light of what we are facing today with all the issues in trying and also in trying to achieve a lot of the sustainable development goals, it's very important that we use technologies to to fasten and make it much more efficient in terms of how we communicate with communities, so that they are more ready and they are more prepared for any eventualities. But the question on whether they will be resilient, probably this is something that we still need the element of education, element of making them aware of and engaging them. And I think that is still required, even if we have all the best technologies in place. And one of the things that we are doing at Urbanice is trying to talk about how we localize the SDGs and also how we accelerate the implementation of achieving those goals through the implementation of the new urban agenda. So we've been actually trying to encourage more and more cities to actually identify the more localized issues that they face at the ground level, especially in areas related to making cities more sustainable. And this is where I think what is important here is that whether or not they could use technologies as an enabling element to further their efforts, or rather to help them or to fasten a lot of their localized efforts. We have just started our Malaysian Urban Observatory, and that's, we adopted the system that was in the UN, but we are trying to make it a more holistic or more integrated system, I would say. And for the Malaysian Urban Observatory, we are also encouraging that this be developed at local level, regional level, as well as at the national level. So I think the idea is that if we could have a bridge between what is really happening physically with some of the aspired future that we want through this digital realm, probably there is, we could achieve and accelerate achieving the SDGs. So though I always believe in, in the interaction, personal interaction, engagement with communities, but I think innovative technologies is actually one way of us getting to it even faster. So we have a lot of collaborations of late, actually, especially in our Kuala Lumpur area. We have a collaboration with even the Alibaba recently in terms of our traffic control system. And also we are adopting some of the best practice even in Hangzhou, China, which have also adopted some of the good traffic control system to improve their efficiency. So I think learning from others is also another way of us accelerating some of our learning curve in using some of these technologies to achieve better solutions for the problems that we have in our cities. And probably one area that we have started discussing about but not really embarking on is how we create the digital twin cities, where we replicate every data that we have on our cities digitally, so that we could have models which are more interdependent, more networked, so that we are able to solve some of the problems that we have in our cities. Though we are not a very old, most of our cities are not really very, very old, but I think there are parts of our cities which are aging as well, aging in terms of infrastructure, aging in terms of physical development. So there are some cities, parts of our city which are also vulnerable. So having technologies that could prompt decision makers, planners, I think would definitely be an added advantage. So I think that's all for me for now. Thank you. Saya tak tahu dengar ke tak dengar.
Dah putus ke? Udah putus. Udah hilang.
Hi, Seonyoung. Do you hear us?
Yes. Hello.
Okay, good. I think my summarizing of Ms. Norliza's introduction there, well, I said that on mute. So let me briefly say again that I think that was a very interesting and enlightening introduction to what is happening in Malaysia. And one of the things that is interesting to me is the benefits of being an early mover or an early adopter of technology, and that's something that I hope can come out in the discussion later. I'm sure there are questions arising from that presentation, but before we go to those questions, I'd like to hear the intervention of Seonyoung Kim from Gwangju City. So Seonyoung, the floor is yours.
Yeah. But before my presentation, Pablo will introduce about some things.
Yeah, just very briefly, introduction. My name is Pablo Gander. I'm coordinating the IUC Asia project of the European Union, and just wanted to say that as Liam was introducing this studies, the Asian Cities report, the European Union through the IUC project is supporting the UN-Habitat and UN ESCAP is cooperating on this whole publication, and especially in the resilience chapter, so that basically we provided here our cooperation partner, the city of Gwangju, the ICEC, and so we're very much delighted about that. And Kim Seonyoung has been working with the European Union since 2016, 17, I'm sorry, and yes, you will hear from her side now about Gwangju.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Seonyoung Kim from Gwangju Metropolitan City. But a lot of people don't know the Seoul very well, but don't know the Gwangju. So I will very briefly introduce Gwangju first. So Gwangju is one of the metropolitan cities in Republic of Korea, and it's at the southwestern side of the country, and 1.5 million people are staying. Gwangju has a vision, which is to be the leading city for climate action. Actually, our government, Korean government, has a goal to cut 2030 greenhouse gas emissions by 37% from BAU levels. But our city, Gwangju city government, has a goal to cut 30% till 2020, and 40% till 2030 from BAU levels. To achieve this goal, we have pursuing 74 projects in the 4 fields. In the reduction field, we have 55 projects, and in the balancing field, we have 6 projects, and in the adapting field, we have 4 projects, and in the practicing part, we have 9 projects. Actually, all these projects cannot be performed by city government only. So the city made a department for climate change reaction department in 2008, and established the Education Center for Climate Action also in 2008. It's the predecessor of the International Climate and Environment Center, where I work now. And this is this file is about my center. The center ICC has 3 teams which are working for policy research, education, and international cooperation. International cooperation to support the city government's climate actions. The policy and research team is working for the developing and researching on climate change and environmental policies. And the education team are rolling out a fortifying infrastructure for education and training about climate and environment for citizens. food.
Seonyoung, unfortunately, we're unable to hear you at the moment. Can you still hear us? No.
They show their ensure their ideas and their environmental policies. This one is the Gwangju City, and our center does. And also normally this is Gwangju's Harish is the construction for the subway second line. We have a subway line on only a line, but to pursue the convenience for the citizens, subway's second line was decided to construct. Even though it's very old decisions and the preparation was ready, but the decision was turned over and public opinion session starts. Because a lot of the citizens are concerned about the environmental problems, so that's the reason why we are keep educating.
We asked them to turn off the video. I think I know the PowerPoint.
Is this the right way to be the smart city Gwangju? And is this the right way to ask for the climate change? And also, is it possible to conserve our environment? And is it possible to restore destructive environment? This kind of things. Like this, citizens doubt the construction. So so now we are stop the construction and re-discussion session starts. This is now Gwangju, and this is Gwangju, and a little bit later I want to describe some of the other matters related with Gwangju. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Seonyoung. Unfortunately, we had a few issues hearing you there, but perhaps that means there'll be more questions for you later as people need to ask even more clarification on that very interesting presentation. So thank you again. And for the final presentation, I would like to ask Josh Woodard from FHI 360 to introduce his perspectives on the approaches that he has been using. Josh, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks, Liam. So we've been doing, as Liam said, FHI 360 is a global development organization. So we work in health and civil society, education, economic development. One of the things that we've been doing over the past couple of years is some work with the Rockefeller Foundation that's really focused on helping organizations, governments, even private sector firms that are working in the resilience space. And we take a pretty broad definition of resilience. So it's not just climactic. It's linked to a whole number of factors: economic resilience, disaster, climactic, health, of course, urban resilience, and everything that comes along with that as part of it, and help individuals who are working in that space think about and learn about how they can use digital technologies more effectively to help them, and more effectively and appropriately to help them to achieve resilience outcomes. So one of the things that we did through this work is we developed a Excel-based tool, which I will try to share here. Hopefully it works. I have a little bit of bandwidth issues, but we'll see if it works here. Okay, hopefully everyone can see this, showing on my side that it's working. We developed this Excel-based tool to help organizations, government agencies, whoever that's interested in using digital technologies for resilience, to help them to plan more effectively, and then also to think about due diligence on technology providers that they're working with. And one of the things, I've worked with a lot of organizations around Asia and actually globally, and one of the things that I often find that they struggle with when it comes to digital technology is that they know their subject area really well. So they understand if it's climate or agriculture or whatever it is. They understand it really well, but they often don't have a real deep sense of how technology can play a role in ways that are effective and really appropriate to the groups that they're working with. Sometimes they end up working with a tech provider really based on a sales pitch that the tech provider makes to them, and they sort of leave a lot of the planning and the work up to that provider, and they often don't know even the right questions to ask themselves when it comes to assessing the capacity of that provider and to really think through how their plans really align against their objectives. So I want to just very quickly, because we don't have a lot of time, show you this tool. And I've already completed one just as with fake data. But basically there's a planning tab, there's a due diligence tab, and there's a summary tab. So the planning tab is, you've already thought about, in this case, so we're thinking about we're going to use mobile information service to share information on improved resilience practices with community members. And it takes you through different modules to force you to answer some questions, and in the process, reflect and think about what you should be doing from a planning perspective. So here we have user appropriateness, organizational priorities, resilience, relevance. So I've already filled this out, but we can change. So when you mouse over here, it says enter a number between 0 and 5, and this is from your own assessment of the technology that we're thinking of using. How does it align with our priorities? So I could change that to a 3, and you'll see the bar changes. Here we have, it's asking questions about user needs and appropriateness. So when you mouse over, anytime you see a red arrow here, it gives you some guidance on what you're supposed to be doing for each of these. And here, based on what you've input, it's giving you some questions to think about. So if you see at the bottom of each module here, it has a question about asking you to reflect. So it's forcing you to think about and answer some questions to reflect as you plan. As we go down, there's some questions around scale and sustainability. So this is asking you to think about the scale that you're trying to reach, the impact, and also the financial sustainability of what you're planning at a high level. All of this is very high level, just to get people thinking about some of this information. Because a lot of times, we found that this level of detail isn't thought about. And so you'll see there's a number of questions. There's different color bars that you fill in. All of this is editable, so you can put this in. One of the things that we did, I've unlocked it for this version, but the version that's available online, everything that's not meant to be input is locked, so you can't accidentally delete something. But we have the password in the guidance tab. So we want people to modify this. If you need to make changes to make it more useful to your work, put in the password, and then you can make specific changes to different questions or subject headings. We want it to be a flexible tool. And then we have implementation considerations. So this is asking us just to think through some issues linked to our capacity as an organization or an agency. What are the things that we might need to do? Do we need to provide training for our staff to be able to use this technology in the way that we're planning? What are some of the risks? And you'll see here, there's a lot of stuff that's automated here. So reputational, if I say the probability of there being a reputational risk if something goes wrong is expected, and the likely impact, let's say, is low, then it automatically colors the bar and it's telling us, okay, that's a low risk overall. And then we have here a section on dependencies, so it's asking you to think again about certain factors like regulatory factors. Is the technology dependent on users having access to reliable electricity, and so on, right? So you would be filling this out as you're working on this with your team or individually. Again, there's reflection, as I said, for each section. And then we have a final analysis where it's just asking, okay, given all of that, how confident are we that this digital technology is appropriate in this instance, given the current circumstances? And so you would put in a number, and then the bar changes based on the number we put, and then we reflect again. So that's on the planning side. And then, of course, this is just a starting point. So you would use whatever tools that you already use for planning, but this would feed into that. And then on the due diligence side, it is about helping you to conduct due diligence on a technology provider specifically. So here, I just put a fake one in called TechBuzz, and then it guides us through some questions. We also have a questionnaire that's a Word document that aligns to these questions, and so you could send that to the provider and have them complete it to give you some information. So we'll see that under provider alignment, there's questions about their organizational and team capacity, questions about their business model viability. I've worked with, in fact, a government agency I was working with a couple years ago. They were telling me about a web portal that a provider had developed for them, and they developed it using their own proprietary system, and then the provider went out of business. And so the government agency was stuck. They didn't have access to the code, and the company went out of business. So they had to pay to get all of this developed again from scratch. So this is really helping to think about how viable is this company we're working with. Are they going to be around in a while if we're dependent on them? There's some optional factors here that ask you, about if you're interested in how they align, how the tech provider aligns with your needs. We had some questions linked to the principles for digital development, which are principles that a number of organizations working in the development sector have signed on to, donors as well. So one of the things here is a question of, are their technologies open source? And so that's important, and to help you to just log that and make sure you're thinking about it and asking those questions. Also, stuff on revenue, where are they getting it? Are they mostly donor dependent? Or are they getting it from other purposes? So you would complete the percentages to the extent that they would share that with you. And then again, there's analysis for each of these, so forcing you to reflect and analyze based on the information. I've left a lot of these blank just for the sample. And then if innovation is something important, that's also an optional factor, as you see here where my mouse is. And then the last part is around impact and scale, and this is what impact have they achieved to date, and what are they projecting in terms of what are they telling us that they could do. So again, it's asking you to answer some different questions. And then we have our final analysis like the other one. So how confident are we that this tech provider can achieve what we need them to? And then what do we need to think about if we're going to continue to work with them? And then just very quickly, I'll show you. So all that comes together in a summary tab. So it pulls information from all the spreadsheets. This is automatic. And then we see everything nicely laid out visually. And this is meant to be something that you could use as a discussion piece. You're meeting with colleagues, with your management, and they ask you, well, how did you come to these conclusions that you came to? You can show them this in a very visual fashion. So it has everything laid out here. And I'm just scrolling through a bit quickly here, but just to give you a sense. There's automatically completed. Everything, the key aspect of what we completed in terms of the video. We have our analysis. So that sharing. So that's the basics of what we've developed and what we're trying to how we're trying to enable practitioners like many of you to think about and plan for the use of technology for resilience more effectively. Let me just end by I'm going to post a couple of links here in the chat. One is a link to download the tool if you're interested. We also have a PDF version of the tool that you can print out on big A1 paper, flip chart size paper, so that way you can work in a group if you wanted to write stuff up before putting it in. And then the last thing is we're actually organizing a workshop in Bangkok on November 27th and 28th, together with the Rockefeller Foundation, who's financially supporting this, and it's going to be focused on digital technologies for resilience. I've just put that link in the chat as well. We really love, one of the things, we did this workshop last year. It was really well received. One of the things where we were missing, I think, was we didn't have a lot of government representation. We had a lot of civil society and nonprofit and tech companies present, but not a lot of government. So we would really love, particularly from the government agencies, if anyone is interested, available, to join us in Bangkok on November 27th and 28th, please check out the details on this link. And I'll also put my email in the chat. Feel free to shoot me an email if you have any questions about any of this. Happy to discuss further. And sorry for the banging, if anyone can hear that. They're doing construction in the building where I am.
Thank you very much, Josh. No, we didn't, at least at this end, hear any banging, but we did hear a very interesting run-through of the tool there. So thank you very much again for that. I was going to have a brief structured intervention from another participant, but unfortunately he's dropped off the line. So now I propose to open to the floor. Are there any questions, or to the virtual floor, are there any questions that anyone would like to ask to any of the three speakers? Please either raise your hand through the hand button on your screen, or post a question into the chat. I'm expecting to see lots of hands raised here. No, I don't see any hands so far, but I don't believe there are no questions. So would anyone be brave enough to raise their hand and go first? If not, I will ask. I have several questions lined up, but I would like to hear from the floor first. Okay, I see one question from Seonyoung. So please go ahead, Seonyoung.
Okay, so thanks. This is Pablo sitting together with Seonyoung. We're just wondering whether whether this resilience tool that was just presented by Josh could be shared also with us, and how it's is this available, or are you going to share this with the broader audience?
Yes, definitely, Pablo. So I just posted in the chat the link to the tool. We have it available. It's online. We put it just on a Google site. One of the reasons for that is because as a NGO, oftentimes we're implementing donor-funded programs, and then 5 years down the line, we don't, the domain doesn't get renewed, and then everything goes offline and disappears. So we've put it there. You can download it. We encourage people to make edits if they need to, and we also would love to hear how people are interacting with it, how they use it. One of the things that I didn't mention is we had a draft tool that we developed, and we tested it on about 50 different technology providers last year. And then we took it out and we went to India, Nepal, to the Republic of Georgia. We also got feedback from the Democratic Republic of Congo. from practitioners, and we completely modify it. We listen to them. What are their needs? What are the things that they're struggling with that they would find useful? Modified it completely into this version. So this was based on a series of user tests, and it's still, whenever we get feedback from people, it's a dynamic tool. So we make changes, if they make sense for a broader audience.
Hello? What happened now? That's okay.
Thank you, Josh.
Perfect.
Thank you, Josh. I think if you don't mind, we can also send that the link to the tool around after the webinar.
Yes, please do. I would love that. Thank you.
Yes, good. We happily will. So are there any other
workshop link too? I would love that too. Sorry.
Sure. That we can also do. We're happy to allow this to be a forum for free promotion of such tools and events. Are there any other questions from the floor? If not, I have a couple of burning questions of my own, but I would like to hear from the floor first. Okay, very well. Then I think I will ask my burning question then to get the discussion going. My question is to Norliza from Malaysia, and I would like to know a little bit more about your work with Alibaba and Gwangju. How did you enter that discussion with Gwangju and Alibaba? How did you get that partnership off the ground? And where is it now, and where do you see it going in the future?
Okay. Hi. Can you hear me? Yeah. The program with the Alibaba was actually a program where the City Hall of Kuala Lumpur, which is our local government for the Kuala Lumpur area, they actually did a collaborative program with Alibaba group. So it was actually to look into the big data, and in particular was also to look at traffic control system in particular. And because what happened is that in Kuala Lumpur we already have our intelligent traffic system that we have, but as of now our system is more of a sensor system, where we have put up sensors in all over the city to actually monitor the traffic situation of Kuala Lumpur. So I think the program, which is also what we call the City Brain program, is where to harness all this information further, so that to harness all this information and to put it actually as part of on the cloud, and to see how you could actually further look at what are the solutions to ease the congestions of the city. I think we were modeling it after Hangzhou city in China, where it was said that with such kind of system, they had managed to save in terms of travel time by 50%, and the speed also increased because the traffic congestion was reduced. The speed increases by 15%, and the accuracy of information and data also was much better. It was about 92%. So this project, I think, is still ongoing. It's still at its very early stage, and so we are yet to find out more on what is the outcome of it. So yeah, so that's I would think that we started this only sometime late last year, this program. So it's still very new actually. Yeah. And part of the program also involves our government agency, which is the we have an organization called the Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation, and that's where the integration of the sensors in the cameras with data gathered from there, from the video footages, from the traffic bureaus, and also linking it to, now that we have more public transit system, our MRT, our LRT, how to link further with those transportation systems with some mapping apps. I think we are at that stage where we are integrating all this system together.
Good. Thank you very much. That was a very interesting overview of how adopting one new approach can lead to the adoption of several other new approaches. I would like are there any other hands? I don't see any other hands at the minute. Is there anyone else who would like to ask a question? In that case, what I would like to do is just to go back to Seonyoung Kim. Unfortunately, we didn't hear the middle part of your intervention or your presentation, rather. So what I would like to do, Seonyoung, is just to go back to your presentation and ask a little bit about how you began the work that you're doing in Gwangju. How did you sort of persuade city leaders in Gwangju to adopt a technological approach to resilience and economic development?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Actually, Gwangju is not very leading city for the new technologies, but we are just adopting the new when the other cities adopt. That's our step, and we are moving forward to the smart city, and the new technologies one by one is adopted. But I can say one thing: how we persuade to adopt new technologies to the citizens' life is that is a testing, practicing kind of. We have, as I already showed you before the picture, we have a citizens conference or citizens roundtable event, and we explain them. But at the conference, not the city officials explain, but the professionals explain, describe its efficiencies and the effects, and also giving them a chance to browse the practice. And the news reports and news articles are the way to persuade and adopt the citizens. For example, in case of the environmental part, I'm not sure it's the perfect example, but I have one example recently. Last year, after attending the COP23, I decided to develop virtual reality program for the educating climate actions. However, it's very hard to persuade developing VR education program for climate change. So actually, not only my boss, but the city government officials has a lot of doubts. So after that time, they doubt about is it effective for the environmental education, and also is it effective way for the consuming the budget? Yeah, this kind of doubt makes me very confusing, and I explain them about I explain and also write a report about the status of a VR program and the present conditions of VR, and gave examples of the VR program. But they still had doubts, so this kind of doubts make the project not to start. So I decided to start to get a fund from the other organization, not from the city government. So I got a fund from, but it's a very small fund, but I have just started to develop the VR education program. And also, simultaneously, I keep release the news articles and continuously and worked with the government departments. After that, the government department means not the city government, the Korean government. So after that, the only way is to put all my effort on the new program or the technology to describe. After this kind of effort, the city governments finally have shown very little interest on this kind of new technology programs. So this is one of the way how I recover the hardships. Yeah, is this the answer for you?
Yes, thank you. It's very interesting. So what is the status of that work now? Now that you, if I understood correctly, you have approached the national government and you have been able to gain some more interest that way. So what is now the status of that initiative? These days I'm developing the VR program for the climate change, especially in Gwangju now. The air pollution is a very serious problem during the winter season and the summer season related with the fine dust. So related with these matters, I developed a VR program to educate to the citizens. So during the developing the program, I have a contact with the government, Korean government department, Korean Department of Environment, and we will have another event to join a joint event. So after that time to have a joint event with the government, then the city government has not very big, but show some interest. Oh, no.
It works.
Exit the screen. Okay. Okay, good. So basically, you're by approaching the national government, that was a way to get more interest from the city government. After initially they weren't so interested, you were able to go to the national government, and once the national government was interested, then the city started to show more interest. That's what I understood from your explanation.
Right. Very good.
And I would also like to ask a question to Josh, and it's a very simple question. So far, has there been much uptake of the tool? Have many people used it, both in NGOs, civil society, or in local government? Are you monitoring the use of it? And if so, what has the feedback been so far?
Yeah, it's a good question. So monitoring the use is unfortunately a bit harder than we would like. We ask people to reach out to us when they've used it, and we've heard back from some organizations that have reacted quite positively to it. There was one organization I was talking with that they work only in health, and so they were interested in modifying the tool through specifically a health lens. And we said, that would be great. Please do that, and then send us the revised version, and we'd be happy to share that broadly as well. So hopefully they'll share that with us soon. The feedback's been, frankly, I think most of the users that we've heard from so far have been on the NGO side of things. I don't know of any governments that have used this. We'd love this to be a tool that would be of value to government agencies as well. And in fact, when we were doing the user testing in the Republic of Georgia, we met with a number of government agencies, including Tbilisi is one of the 100 resilient cities. So we met with their chief resilience officer to get her feedback on how something like this would be useful. It sounded like, at least in their case, the due diligence side of it wasn't really applicable in their case because they have very strict procurement processes and they have tools and templates for those already, but that the planning side would be useful in their case. So yeah, I wish I knew more about the extent to which people are using it. Anecdotally, we've received positive feedback from probably a dozen or so organizations saying that they're using it, but I know that we've gotten many more hits to the website than that. So people are accessing it at a higher level, but I just don't know how they might be using it.
Thank you, Josh. Yeah, it's an interesting question, and the reason I ask is because as I wrote to you before this webinar, I have a very difficult question for you, which is about how we ensure the uptake of technology in such a way that benefits the poor, the poorest and the most vulnerable, and the least resilient in society. And I'm trying to answer in my own head whether a tool like this can be something that accelerates the ability of the poor to benefit from technology or not. And that's a very open question that I have. I wonder if you have any thoughts on that, or is it perhaps too advanced a question at this stage to ask?
No, it's a really good question. I would say I don't think that, so the users of this tool wouldn't be marginalized or poor populations. It's meant more for at an organizational or government agency level. But one of the things that I know I went through really quick when I was showing the tool, but we have a section called organizational priorities. Within that, there's a question that forces you to assess. The question is, how well does our planned use of this technology impact each of the following? And then it forces you to assess on a negative to positive scale, from high negative impact to high positive impact. A number of different segments. We have poor populations, marginalized, illiterate populations, women, LGBT, children, differently abled. You can also insert your own. So at least, from our hope is that it forces people to reflect on this a little bit and think, I never would have thought to think about whether or not what I'm doing is going to have a positive or negative impact on differently abled, for example, or children. So by forcing that reflection, then they may discover certain things that could end up creating larger divides between certain populations, and they can plan accordingly. So they can make sure that they're changing their design or their plan to mitigate those negative impacts, and hopefully to make sure that it has positive impacts across the board and is not leading to further disparity between different groups.
Good, thank you. It's a very interesting question, not one that I think we can answer in this webinar, but it is one that, of course, in the broader context of the chapter that we want to think about. Technology can be, as the Malaysian presentation highlighted to us, can be a great enabler, and it can be a way to engage the poor. But if used or if applied incorrectly, it can also be something that exacerbates the inequality between rich and poor, because of course it's the wealthier that are more naturally able to adopt technology. So it's an open question, and one that we have to continually think about here. I talked quite a lot. I would like to ask again, are there any questions from the floor to any of the three speakers? And if so, please either write as a message into the chat or raise your hand through your hand raising button on your screen. I think we have some shyness on the floor, or we have people who don't feel confident to raise their hands. Once again, are there any questions from the floor here? If not, I have another couple of questions that I would like to ask, but I would like to hear from you first. Okay, very well. Then I will ask another question here, and this question is to all three speakers, primarily to Norliza, but I would also open this question to the other two speakers as well. The question is, how do you adapt technology in such a way that it works in urban environments with limited data availability? So, for example, working in informal settlements or urban poor communities, how can you get technology to work in those communities?
Yeah, well, I think it's definitely challenging, but for Malaysia particularly, being connected is something that minimally, I think the coverage of connection to all communities is quite, I wouldn't say 100%, but I would say easily we have covered almost 70% of the entire country in terms of connectivity. So that's an advantage, because in terms of even internet penetration, you know, we are about 85%. So in the least, what I'm trying to say is that information can get across somehow or other to communities. And the use of cell phones in this country is also very high. And I mean, that's again, you know, the first rule of how you get across, you know, for people to adapt new things. Yeah? So that would be the first step, you know. And I guess when you're trying to adapt new technologies, for example, yesterday we were trying to put in some of these machines in terms of waste management machines, where you recycle the waste and it'll give you rewards. But the machine is a little bit high tech. You know, it has a digital screen, and so of course in the beginning, you know, people were worried whether it was put in an urban poor community actually as a test bed, and to see how it will work out, you know. Of course, now the fear is that whether or not it will be vandalized, whether or not they will be able to use it well, and whether the objective of recycling will be achieved. But I think this is where the role of you know, local governments as well as NGOs are very important, where we have to come in to help educate, to help communicate with some of these communities, to assist them in terms of accepting some of these new technologies and systems that will help to enhance their communities. So I don't think there's a shortcut to it. In some cases, I think it is a progress that we have to go through, and yeah, so it's not fast, but at least the first step is that Malaysia believes in making everyone connected. And one of the best things that we have, I think, done is also the investment in technology is only not in terms of digital, but it's also in agriculture. It's also in terms of how it can help e-commerce for even the rural areas. So those sectors of small home-based economies are also being developed all over the country. You know? So and through just very using, you know, the most minimum, which is connectivity, internet connectivity at the least. So from there, if you want to start off with something more, I think this is where they need to know that the rural population or the informal settlements population, they need to be just as confident to embrace some of these new technologies. And I don't think it's difficult if they can be taught on how to use them. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that was a very insightful answer because, you know, perhaps the thinking is that, well, the wealthier people will adopt technology anyway, but the poorer people, they need a helping hand to adopt technology. That seems to me like a very simple but very important message that we need to carry forward to the report here and to the chapter. I'd like also to open up that question, the same question that I asked to you. I'd like to open that question up to the other two speakers if they have any thoughts on this issue.
Can I?
Yes, please, yeah.
Actually, in case of Korea, the citizens are like a sponge to observe the new technology. So actually, like in Korea, citizens adopt the technologies first, and then they ask for the technologies to the city governments. Actually, because the city government's speed is a little bit slower than the citizens. So, for example, in the private sector, they are using the very new technologies they are using, and the citizens receive the kind of technologies. So they ask for the city government that this is the way our Gwangju technology adaptations. Yes, so it's a little bit different to the other cities, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that would be our expectation, that people in Korea are very quick adopters of technology. But it's interesting, nevertheless, that they are the ones who drive the city government rather than the city government driving them. And that's an interesting point as well. I think that also fits into the sort of working hypothesis that we have here, that the wealthier people take up and adopt technology autonomously, but it's maybe the poorer and more vulnerable who need assistance in order to adopt it. I also open that question to Josh, if you have any thoughts.
Sorry, one more remark here from Seonyoung.
Yes, please. Sorry, yes, please go ahead.
I forgot to tell about the app. So technologies, city government speaks about the technologies a little bit late, but in case of they are developing apps continuously. For example, Gwangju city government recently they developed the app application which is called Everyone Together Green. So in this app, they are gather the eco processes, and they just show how to recycle this kind of things. And also when they connected to their electricity and they connected to their electricity paying number, in that case they can show how much they should pay the electricity fee, and also how much they deduct to the carbon emissions. CO2 emission. This kind of the thing they can show on the app, but a lot of the citizens don't know this kind of application is
Resilient together?
No, this application is so city government just focusing on the promotion to this kind of applications is for the citizens. This is actually the technology is a little bit late, but the city government is focusing on the promotions for this kind of application to the citizens. This is the way Gwangju goes.
Would you be able to share this, maybe a link to this app, even if it's in Korean, so that the people can see that?
Yeah, I should check the website.
Okay, we will type in the chat the website.
Yes, thank you. That would be very good. Yeah, and even if it's in Korean, it's nevertheless very useful to see examples of this type of thing, because there are still, perhaps relatively few examples of where local governments have been able to develop this kind of app as a means to engage their citizens in, let's say, more environmentally friendly behaviors. So if no further from you, I also open that previous question to Josh in case he has any thoughts to add on this.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, just very quickly, I mean, the two examples really highlight to me of why it's so important to really deeply understand the users that you are targeting, because it's very different from between countries, even within cities within countries, and then population segments within countries as well. Like I would imagine that people who are 80 years old and over in Gwangju are probably less technologically savvy than the younger population. So, we have to. It's just really important to remember that and think about, and then to your point about how do we make sure that we're not driving disparity, just really making sure that we're deeply aware of the needs, the abilities, the interests of different citizens or target populations that we're working with.
Josh, I lost you slightly there toward the end of the point you were making. Perhaps you could just repeat the end of what you were saying there.
Sure. I mean, the bottom line was that I was just saying it's really important for any time you're thinking about using digital technology for something to engage with citizens or a population segment, to really make sure that you understand, their needs, their ability, their interests, because it is going to vary. In different cities, different countries, people are more or less savvy with technology. And then also within communities, there's differences. If we look at people who are older, maybe 80 years old and up, they're going to have different interests and experiences with digital technology than younger people. And so I was just making a pitch for user-centered design to approaches to using technology to ensure that they are as inclusive as possible.
Thank you, Josh. Yeah, I think that's a very important point. Okay, we're coming to the end of the time that we had allowed for the webinar. We said 1 hour and a half. So what I would like to do in the absence of any other hands being raised virtually is to ask each of the speakers to give a 1-minute key takeaway message, the key thing that you want to say to us that we take forward into the chapter of the future of Asian cities. So I'd like to go around each of the 3 speakers, and if you could give us 1 minute of the key messages and the key takeaways that you would like us to take away from this webinar. So please, Ms. Norliza first.
I think for me, it's very important that the new technologies, innovative technologies, be part of how we pursue the implementation of the SDG as well as the new urban agenda. I think in this way, we could have a more, we can use it as an enabling tool, and that way we could probably fasten the implementation. Because there's so many. I think what always makes it difficult for me is because innovative technology is so huge actually, the context of it. But if we apply that, the application of innovative technologies on how we deliver some of the SDG commitments, I think that would be how we could integrate the role of technology faster. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And Seonyoung, if you could also give us a 1-minute key message, key takeaway from this.
Yes, new technologies and smart cities and this kind of new things is very important to all the people. So furthermore, I think how this kind of new technology is related with the SDGs and also how much is effective on the citizens' life. So every city has their own limitations, but related with this matters about the SDGs and also the citizens' life, then we can go over this kind of obstacles. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Josh, if you could also give us, 1 minute of key messages.
Yeah, I mean, echoing what Norliza said, I think, it's important to remember that digital technology is just an enabler, it's a tool. So it's important to not get sort of wrapped up in the excitement, the hype of things, and then just move forward with technology leading what you're trying to do, but rather looking at, how can technology enable us to do what we're trying to achieve in ways that are more efficient, more cost-effective, more impactful, and then just being really deliberate and thoughtful in your planning so that you are thinking through a lot of these issues that we've spoken about, that you're not just sort of running in with the innovation first.
Good. Thank you very much. And thank you to all three of the speakers who have given very considered and insightful inputs into this webinar. Yes, I see that, Seonyoung, you have a further comment to make, please.
Thank you. That's from my side, and Pablo sitting together with Kim Seonyoung here. It's for Ms. Hashim from Malaysia. It's just because we were meeting yesterday here in Brussels, the chief executive of the city region of Iskandar, and so we might be cooperating early next year within the Global Covenant of Mayors with them. So my question is, the experience that you were sharing about Kuala Lumpur, is it also something that you are also doing with other cities in Malaysia, like Iskandar, and also if you are also in touch with Iskandar and eventually could back us if we make a national-wide event with the city of Iskandar in the first quarter of next year?
Yeah, I think for Iskandar, we were quite involved in the early days of the establishment of their Iskandar Urban Observatory and subsequently in their low carbon society. So I think, yeah, definitely we can, see which areas we could assist further. Because for the implementation of NOAA and SDG, we've been going around Malaysia, and Johor was one of the city that we focus on as well, apart from central region in Kuala Lumpur. So yeah, looking forward to collaborate in any way possible.
Great, thank you very much. And thanks so much to the UN colleagues for making this possible.
Yes, thank you. Thank you again. And thank you again to all three of the speakers for their very insightful interventions that they've made here. I don't quite know if there's a round of applause function on this. There certainly should be, but I don't think there is. But rest assured that if this were a physical meeting, there would be a round of applause for all three of you right now for the very well received inputs that you have given. Let me therefore very briefly sum up a couple of the things that I have taken from this. I'm really interested and I would like to learn a lot more about the partnership with the tech sector. I really like to hear things like cities working with companies like Alibaba. I think that's fascinating. I'm always interested in hearing about driving connectivity, especially with poor areas and rural areas. I also like this message of technology as an enabler. You know, technology is a means and is not the end, and I think we have to not lose sight of that. And I also like the mention of the household businesses. That's so important, especially here in Asia, given the size of the informal economy, and trying to ensure that the informal economy benefits from technology is a very important thing. Of course, we have this discussion of how to target the poorest and the most vulnerable and the elderly, so that they benefit from technology. As I mentioned earlier, we see that the wealthy tend to adopt technology on their own, but the poor and the vulnerable and the elderly don't necessarily adopt technology, and therefore it's a very important consideration of how we help them to adopt technology, and how technology can be an enabler for them to become more resilient. So those are a couple of the messages that I took from this, and I'm sure my colleagues here will have a few more that they have made a note of. The app from Gwangju, we can share that after the event, and also the tools that FHI 360 have shared. We will also share that as well as their workshop. We have a workshop of our own that we have to promote. On the 23rd of November here in Bangkok, we will have an expert group meeting on Chapter 1, which is this chapter, the Governance and Resilience chapter of the Future of Asian Cities report. If you are interested to participate in that meeting, then please get in touch with Omar or Alex or myself, and we can give you further information about how to connect with that meeting. And I think that is everything from me and from us here. So let me say thank you very much again for all of your participation, and especially thank you to the three speakers for your excellent and very insightful inputs into this first webinar that we have done on technology for resilience for the first chapter of the Future of Asian Cities. So thank you very much again, and good morning, good afternoon. Thank you from us. Thank you.